When Bitcoin prices shot up last month from $325 to $400 per Bitcoin, it's a 20% increase in price. Volumes on most of the US exchanges and some of the Chinese exchanges went up by a factor of 5 to 10. Volatility is a big factor that affects the growth of exchanges. Consumers and merchants don't want to hold an asset that can drop by 10% in an hour. They want more stability, so they go to the exchanges for immediate exchange from fiat to Bitcoin or vice versa. Consumer views on the safety of asset really affects the growth of these exchanges. Even though that Mt. Gox occurred a year and a half ago, you would think that Bitcoin exchanges would have increased their security to virtually eliminate hacking. But even this year, Bitfinex and Bitstamp were hit by hacking incidences. So Bitcoin exchanges are working on improving security to protect their customers. Regulation is another item that affects the growth of exchanges. At a recent conference in Shanghai, I was on a panel where we were debating whether whether regulation was good or bad for Bitcoin exchanges. I argued for thoughtful regulation that would give consumers greater protection and confidence. My opponent took the libertarian view and argued for less government intrusion and greater privacy for individuals. It was kind of funny because when he saw that he was losing the debate, that's losing from my perspective, he picked up his briefcase and walked off the stage, and the audience cheered him on as he walked off in protest. Later I learned that he was the ringleader of the latest Ponzi scheme in Shanghai. Consumer adoption of Bitcoin is another big factor affecting the growth of Bitcoin exchanges. As consumers pay with Bitcoin, as merchants accept Bitcoin, both need exchanges to convert fiat to Bitcoin and vice versa. And finally, the media. The media, in my view, focuses too much on dramatic events such as drug deals and mentioning recently the terrorists of Paris using Bitcoin as a means of financing. I would prefer that the media focus on more legitimate uses of Bitcoin. Okay, future of exchanges, and what do I see for the future? I believe that there are too many Bitcoin exchanges, but there's a need for local exchanges that are reflective of local culture, local regulations, and local customs. So I make a comparison of Bitcoin exchanges to stock exchanges. There are 86, as I said earlier, Bitcoin exchanges, but there are only 35 stock exchanges. There are 2.5 times more Bitcoin exchanges than there are stock exchanges. But if you look at daily volumes, there's a 200 times difference. Bitcoin has barely $500 million a day of volume, whereas stocks trade easily over 100 billion per day, depending on the market. So the stock market is 2.5 times bigger, but yet there are 2.5 times, stock markets are 200 times bigger. So the question is, why are there 2.5 times more Bitcoin exchanges than there are stock exchanges? So I believe that in the future, there will be a wave of consolidation amongst Bitcoin exchanges. So instead of looking like this map, which is the first chart that I showed of Bitcoin exchanges showing all 86 exchanges, it may look something like this in the future, where there's a dozen, there are a dozen large stock markets here. There could be in the future a dozen large Bitcoin exchanges operating in 10 countries, including China and the United States. Before I open up for questions, I would leave you with what I would consider my takeaways, or what I would like you to remember from this. Basically, I would encourage you to be a tough customer to your Bitcoin exchange. Ask them the tough questions like, how do I know that you're not going to steal my money? or lose my money, or have others steal my money. Ask for financial audits, security audits. Ask for insurance to protect against theft and malfeasance. Ask to interview the backgrounds of the principals. And if you don't get sufficient answers, I would not trade on that exchange. Remember, it's our experience that your greatest risk in trading Bitcoin is not the trading risk, not trading losses, but it's the counterparty risk. So thank you for your thoughts, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Please.
What are the revenue model for the Chinese exchanges?
Say it again.
The revenue model for the Chinese exchanges, if they don't charge fees, how are they generated?
Right. So they don't charge trading fees, but they do charge other fees. So the most typical are withdrawal and deposit fees. So if you're putting fiat in or fiat out, they're charging those fees. Many of them have diversified into stock market trading. So what you do is you put up your Bitcoin as collateral, and they'll lend you money to buy stocks and bonds, which they generate commissions from. They also are lenders. So they lend money to buy Bitcoin on margin, and they make money on the interest on lending. And the largest exchanges also operate futures exchanges. And you pay commissions and fees for buying and selling futures. You can buy, for example, up to 100 to 1 leverage on these exchanges. So it's it's not really true that they charge no fee. They don't charge trading fees, which results in the large trading volumes. Sean.
Yeah, hi, it's Sean Walsh from Woods Adventures. I have sort of a two-part question, or maybe it's two questions that I'm going to try to cram them together. And you may have gone through this earlier, I apologize if I missed it, but how thinly traded, if you look at the total number of Bitcoin that are outstanding versus the number of Bitcoin that are actually changing hands on the exchanges, what's the ratio there? Like what percentage of existing Bitcoins are being are deposited into the exchange accounts? And that's part one. And then part two is, are you seeing any evidence of capital flight from China using the Bitcoin exchanges around the world? I've read and heard some speculation that tighter capital controls in China are a contributing factor to increasing Bitcoin price.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, on your second question, I think that, there is a great desire of moving local currency in China out of China. And there's a fairly extensive government approval process in order to do that. And there are certain permitted industries. For example, if Chinese want to invest in US real estate, you apply to the government, you want to buy a $10 million building, and almost all of those transactions are approved. It may take 6 months. You may have to file a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of disclosure required, but you can do it. And there are other industries too, because the government is encouraging foreign investment from China out of China. Doing it through Bitcoin, you hear about it. I've never actually have seen it. Not that I go out of my way to observe it, but we're very active, and I think I would have seen it. I think the government is concerned about it or is watching it, and if it becomes a big trade, I think they would move to shut it down.
It also occurs to me when I hear the speculation that it should be kind of like net neutral to the price of Bitcoin, because if somebody wants to move money out of China, if they have RMB and they want to convert that into USD located in the States, they're going to have to sell the Bitcoin on the other side of the transaction, which is going to have a downward force on the price of Bitcoin, when they
Well, there are, and in any given second, tiny price discrepancies between China and the Western exchanges. And of course, among exchanges, there are tiny price discrepancies. And one of our trading strategies is to arb that difference. So we provide the liquidity that helps equalize the price, and we get paid a little bit to do that.
Thank you.
Please.
Scott from Apple Point. Great presentation. You have the insider view, which is great. We power exchanges, so I'm kind of.
I know you powered you worked with Bitfinex.
Correct, yeah, and several others as well.
Right.
And what was interesting to me is your ability to do diligence on these exchanges. You identified 86. Of the 86, how many of them passed through due diligence?
10.
10.
10, yeah.
Is that-
Now, a
I'm
lot
not
of,
surprised.
yeah, no, it's not just do they pass their due diligence, like, they may be very good exchanges and very good people, but their volume isn't big enough for us to trade. For example, last month I was in Mexico City and spent a couple days with our friends at BitSo, Dan Vogel and Peters. Actually, I met them for the first time at an Inside Bitcoin conference in New York. And they're very credible people. Dan Vogel, Stanford undergrad in computer science, Harvard Business School. Father is one of the largest bankers in Mexico, extremely well connected to banks, regulators, well-financed, run a great exchange, but they do less than 100 Bitcoin per day. So it's very hard for me to trade there. But our eyes are open, watching, and when their volume gets to be, say, 1,000 Bitcoin a day, and we will happy to help them get there, we will, start trading there. And that's just one example. I mean, there are many others that are like that in the Philippines, in Korea, India. There's a second tier in China that are very good, but we're waiting for their volumes to grow.
One other question. Is there a part of the world that has a lot of money but not an exchange yet? Do you think the people of that region would benefit if
Yeah, Venezuela. I have a business school buddy who has lived and worked in Venezuela his whole life, and his fortunes have gone with the economy. Right now, he's way down. And his son approached me and said, "Look, wow, Bitcoin. We got to get it going to save our economy or to help the people of Venezuela." So there's an example. And if you want to meet this this fellow,
I would love to.
I'll introduce you
I got more
afterwards.
questions for you too.
Okay, sure.
Hi, Michael Turpin, Bit Angels.
Hi.
So I was surprised to see the chart with, or the list of all the Chinese banks that worked with the exchanges. Now, are they simply the banking partners of the exchanges, or can the average Chinese citizen go and do the equivalent of an ACH transfer in from their bank account to buy Bitcoins?
The Chinese government prohibits Chinese banks from dealing directly with the Chinese Bitcoin exchange. So
What do they deal with there, those banks?
So Chinese, in Chinese there's a saying about there's a Chinese solution to everything, right? And they're very creative in thinking of ways to work with a bank, but not directly, and still meet, I would say, it's a gray area from their perspective, but it's so small that the regulators are looking at
But
another way.
I guess my specific question would be, can a Chinese citizen go and spend $1, $10,000, or $100,000 through the equivalent of a wire transfer to a Chinese Bitcoin exchange to buy Bitcoin?
No. So, but they can do what you just said, but not directly. So what they do, for example, there are many different solutions, but one solution that we've seen is that a Chinese Bitcoin exchange creates a company that deals with the bank, and that company deals with the
So
Bitcoin
these are the ones
exchange.
in the Hong Kong stock market where they're
Wherever.
putting money through there. Okay. Thank you.
Wherever. And there are other ways too, like there's one exchange where money goes to buy a piece of paper, and that piece of paper then goes to the Bitcoin exchange. So they're not dealing directly, they're going through a third party or third party instrument.
Thank you.
Very good questions. One final one, perhaps?
Simon from CoinGift. I have a question. What do you think about the possibility of a blockchain tying all liquidity in all exchanges together and practicality of that approach? And how will it affect the volumes?
Yeah, I don't think that's practical. Think about stock markets, equity markets. There are 12 large equity markets in the world. Why don't they all get together and be one exchange? There's been a lot of consolidation, a lot of merger activity, but there's room for being local because there are, of course, local regulations, there are local cultures, there are local ways of thinking and doing things. So I think there's definitely a strong need for local exchanges. But on the other hand, there are economies of scale of sharing clearing systems, settlement systems, and other administrative systems.
All right, great. I'm afraid we're going to have to end it there, but thank you for making the trip, and thanks for being an attendee and now a speaker.